In the chaotic years of World War II, when entire nations clashed and millions of soldiers marched across scorched earth, legends were born and lost within the smoke of battle. Some were written into the history books, celebrated in parades and memorials. Others, like the mysterious German sniper who single-handedly destroyed 12 tanks in a single day, disappeared into obscurity, his story whispered only among survivors who witnessed the impossible. No official German record mentions his name. No propaganda poster features his face. Yet, across the Eastern Front, stories of a lone sniper capable of stopping entire armored columns spread like wildfire. Soldiers from both sides called him the Ghost of Kursk, though no one could ever prove he existed. The story begins during one of the most brutal confrontations of the war, the Battle of Kursk, in July 1943. This was the largest tank battle in human history. Over 2 million men and nearly 6,000 tanks clashed in the fields and forests of western Russia. It was here, among the smoldering wrecks of Panzer and T-34 tanks, that a German sniper reportedly carried out one of the most extraordinary feats of the entire conflict. The sniper, according to surviving German accounts, belonged to the Wehrmacht's elite sharpshooter division attached to the 3rd Panzer Army. He was not a common soldier. Trained as both a sniper and an anti-tank specialist, he combined two of the most lethal skills on the battlefield: precision marksmanship and engineering improvisation. He arrived at Kursk in early July, just as the German offensive known as Operation Citadel was beginning. The air was thick with heat and tension. The Soviet forces had prepared extensive defenses, deep minefields, anti-tank ditches, and fortified trenches. Every meter of ground was contested. For snipers, Kursk was both a nightmare and an opportunity. The open plains made concealment nearly impossible, but the sheer density of troops and machinery created endless chaos to hide within. It was during these opening days that the sniper, whose comrades called Eric, though no surname was ever confirmed, began to distinguish himself. According to one after-action report later recovered by Allied intelligence, Eric operated on the northern flank of the German advance, where Soviet armor had broken through and was threatening to encircle a section of the Panzergrenadiers. The German tanks were pinned down by Soviet fire, and infantry positions were collapsing. Eric, separated from his unit, took cover near a destroyed farmhouse. From that position, he had a clear view of the Soviet tanks rolling in, a dozen of them, advancing in a tight formation. Any ordinary sniper would have been powerless against tanks. But Eric was anything but ordinary. He carried not just a Mauser 98K sniper rifle with a Zeiss scope but also a Panzerbuchs 39, a German anti-tank rifle that was largely considered obsolete by 1943. The weapon could no longer pierce the armor of newer Soviet tanks. Yet, Eric understood that tanks weren't only made of armor. They had weak spots: vision slits, exhausts, open hatches, and exposed fuel caps. For hours, he waited. The air trembled with the rumble of engines. As the first T-34 tank passed within 200 meters, he took aim, not at the crew, but at the exposed fuel line just beneath the turret. One carefully measured shot rang out, and seconds later, the tank erupted in a flash of fire. The explosion was so sudden that nearby crews halted, believing they had struck a mine. Before they could react, Eric fired again, this time at the periscope of another advancing tank. The shot shattered the glass and wounded the commander inside, forcing the crew to abandon the vehicle. Using his rifle and anti-tank weapon interchangeably, he began systematically dismantling the armored column, targeting each machine's weak point with terrifying accuracy. By the end of the afternoon, 12 tanks lay burning across the field. German infantry who later advanced through the area reported seeing the wreckage scattered in a near-perfect line, each tank destroyed in a different way. Some had internal explosions, others showed bullet holes in precise mechanical points. It was as if the destruction had been engineered, not fought. When his comrades finally found the position from which the shots had been fired, Eric was gone. The farmhouse had been reduced to rubble, but his rifle lay propped against a charred beam. His helmet was beside it, with a single bullet hole through the rim, yet no body was found. For weeks, rumors spread through the German lines. Some said Eric had been killed and buried in the explosion. Others believed he had been captured by Soviet troops and executed. But a few insisted he had survived. that he'd simply melted into the forest, choosing to fight alone rather than retreat. The Soviet troops told a similar story, though from their side, it sounded almost like superstition. Several Red Army tankers reported seeing a single German marksman, who appeared and vanished like a phantom. They said he fired with supernatural precision, hitting tanks in places no ordinary soldier would even aim. Some units even refused to advance through certain sectors, fearing the ghost with the silver rifle. In reality, the ghost may have been a man who had lost faith in both sides. Some historians later speculated that Erich was not just a loyal German soldier but a disillusioned veteran, perhaps from the eastern campaigns where both armies committed unspeakable atrocities. There were whispers that he had once been part of a penal unit, serving his sentence through combat, and had seen too much death to care about victory anymore. What happened after that day remains unknown. No further records mention his name or his unit. After the war, Allied investigators combed through German archives looking for any trace of the sniper who destroyed 12 tanks. They found partial field notes describing a lone sharpshooter neutralizing Soviet armor near Orel, but the documents ended abruptly, marked missing after engagement. Some Soviet veterans who survived Kursk continued to tell stories about him long after the war. One, a tank commander named Ivan Mirov, described the scene decades later. Greater than, we thought it was artillery at first. Then one by one, our tanks began to explode in strange ways. The engine of my comrade's tank caught fire, though no shell had struck it. It was as if someone knew exactly where to hit. We never saw him, only the glint of a scope for a second, and then smoke. Even more strangely, after the war, reports emerged from German civilians in East Prussia and Poland who claimed to have seen a solitary man in a tattered uniform living in the woods, carrying an old sniper rifle and avoiding contact with anyone. Whether this was Erich or simply another lost soul of the war remains a mystery. In analyzing this story, military historians have debated whether it was even possible for a single man to destroy 12 tanks in a day with the weapons available at the time. Technically, yes, but only under extraordinary circumstances. The Panzerbuchs 39, while ineffective against heavy armor, could damage critical external systems on Soviet tanks if fired at close range or from the right angle. A skilled marksman with deep technical knowledge could exploit weak points that most soldiers ignored. Combined with sniper precision, camouflage, and patience, it's conceivable that someone could disable multiple tanks, especially if those tanks were advancing in close formation or passing through vulnerable terrain like a narrow field. But what truly makes the story remarkable isn't the mechanics of the feat, it's the man himself. In a war defined by vast armies and industrial-scale slaughter, the tale of one soldier standing against machines captures something deeply human. It reflects both the ingenuity and the madness of war, how desperation can drive one person to achieve the impossible, and how easily such stories vanish when the guns fall silent. After the war, many German snipers were forgotten, their records lost or destroyed. Some changed their names, others fled to remote villages to escape retribution. Perhaps Erich was one of them, a man who saw the end coming and chose to disappear rather than be captured. Others believe his vanishing was deliberate, a symbolic end to a man who had long ceased to fight for anyone but himself. There's even a theory among certain war historians that Erich was not a single man but a composite, an amalgamation of several German sharpshooters whose exploits were merged into one myth. That would explain why the story persisted on both sides of the front but was never officially recorded. Legends like these often grew from kernels of truth, a destroyed column here, a missing sniper there, until they became wartime folklore. And yet, eyewitness accounts from both German and Soviet veterans are too consistent to dismiss entirely. 12 destroyed tanks in a single day. A sniper's nest found abandoned. A missing man whose rifle and helmet remained behind, as if he had simply stepped into another world. In the decades following the war, a few researchers attempted to trace his identity. A German historian named Dieter Reusch uncovered a wartime letter from a soldier of the 3rd Panzergrenadier Division. It read, "Greater than, we lost contact with Erich today. He stayed behind with his rifle and the anti-tank gun when the Russians advanced. We heard explosions for hours. When we returned, the tanks were burning, but he was gone. No body, no trace. Some say he went into the woods. Maybe he found peace there. That letter, dated July 12, 1943, remains the only known first-hand reference to the event. Whether Eric was a ghost, a hero, or simply a myth, his story speaks to the strange intersection between truth and legend that defines all wars. For soldiers at the front, such tales offered hope, fear, or a glimpse of something greater than themselves. To the Germans, he was a symbol of defiance. To the Soviets, a reminder that no machine was invincible. Perhaps that's why, decades later, his name still surfaces in forums and battlefield archives, always with the same haunting question: who was he? There are no photographs, no medals, no grave. Only the memory of an impossible act: 12 tanks destroyed in a single day, and a soldier who vanished as suddenly as he appeared. War is filled with heroes who wanted glory, and villains who sought power. But sometimes, history is shaped by ghosts, those who neither sought recognition nor survived to claim it. And somewhere in the silent fields of Kursk, beneath the grass that now covers burned steel and shattered glass, perhaps lies the final resting place of the man who turned a sniper's rifle into the deadliest weapon of the day, the German sniper who vanished after taking out 12 tanks in a single day.